This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
Good Monday morning, my friends, and welcome to it. It's the Steve Gruber Show to get you started this work week. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you here. And a lot to cover this week. A lot to cover. President Obama and Vladimir Putin will be getting nose to nose, toe to toe at the United Nations. Russia, of course, gaining a lot of power in the Middle East. We'll talk about that. In Michigan, the water in places like Flint, contaminated with lead, but that might not be all. It could cost billions to fix the problems. We'll talk about that this week. We'll talk about the move to make it so if you get thrown out of office, say if you have a sexual scandal and your colleagues say you can't be here anymore, or you resign your seat, you can't turn around and run for that seat again. A new law will be put into effect. Too late for this one, I believe, but a new law will be put into effect to prevent that from happening. But let's start with John Boehner. John Boehner on Friday with his shocking announcement for many that he was stepping down. Surprised me. But it caught you by surprise as well. Speaker of the House, John Boehner, after 4.5 years, says it's time for me to go. It's time for me to fly, he says, which is, let's be honest, it's good. John Boehner has been an ineffectual Speaker of the House through his entire tenure. I hate to say it, but he's no Nancy Pelosi. Not when it comes to getting things done. Not when it comes to regurgitating the talking points. Not when it comes to enacting a plan for this country and following the terms of his political party. Now, he's raised some eyebrows by hitting back hard at some of those on the right and Tea Partiers and so forth, but the fact of the matter is John Boehner was a feckless politician who was ineffective, and he's trying to claim victories that, frankly, most of us don't see. And there may be some truth to that. What I will give John Boehner a compliment for and credit for is being man enough to stand up and step up and say, I'm stepping down. That takes some guts. So I appreciate the fact that John Boehner is classy enough and has enough courage, because that takes courage to walk away from that kind of power. He wouldn't have lost his seat. It would have been a bloodbath. He would have been there. He would have been just fine. But at what cost would it have been? So apparently John Boehner was affected by the words of the Pope. He was certainly moved to tears. But there it is. Ohio Governor John Kasich, by the way, telling you, of course, they're both from Ohio, so they're friends. They've been friends for a long time. Kasich, of course, running for president. Telling anti-establishment Republicans in the House to look in the mirror before attacking outgoing Speaker Boehner. On the CBS program Face the Nation yesterday, the people who keep saying that they want things to happen, what have they accomplished? What have they gotten done, said Kasich. A lot of the people that are doing the complaining are saying, why isn't anything getting done? Maybe they ought to look in the mirror. Well, they served together, by the way, for 10 years. For 10 years, they've served together back in the day, in the 1990s. So anyhow, Boehner's going to leave at the end of about a month from now, the end of October, just barely over a month, and he'll be on down the road. Kevin McCarthy, the odds-on favorite from California to replace him. It'll definitely send a different trajectory for this Congress. But here's the problem, you see. After the big sweeping elections in 2014, nothing changed, and I suggest that Mitch McConnell ought to go with him. And it's not because I'm some radical partisan. I'm not some extreme right, person who's going to get labeled as a Tea Party or so forth. I'm conservative, yes. What I believe in is results. Remember how they told us they were going to send this to the president's desk and that to the president's desk? Because that way we could get some things done around here. Well, it didn't happen. Didn't happen that way anyhow. Meanwhile, in another story, I'm here to call bull on the Rowan County, Kentucky clerk Kim Davis and her near miraculous yet oh so predictable conversion from lifelong Democrat to suddenly a newly minted Republican. I smell something here, don't you? Davis spent 5 days in jail earlier this month after refusing to sign marriage licenses for gay couples. The uproar spread across the nation like a wildfire, with liberal commentators going wild and attacking Davis for her backwoods Christian beliefs. Davis was made a mockery of until GOP presidential candidates Mike Huckabee and Ted Cruz came to her side in defense. I suggested at the time and still believe she should have been in jail for refusing to do the job she was elected to do. She was not elected to her church's Bible study team. No, she was elected to do the work of local government. And guess what? You don't get to pick and choose which laws you want to uphold. That kind of discrimination is reserved for the likes of Barack Obama. What if she were a Quaker and refused to issue concealed weapons permits on the basis of her faith, which made her a pacifist, and therefore she could just not comply with supporting guns? That sure would have made folks on the right go bananas, huh? Anyway, I know a clear setup when I see one. This move to suddenly become a Republican sounds like just another well-orchestrated maneuver to embarrass the GOP. This doesn't even pass a stink test for me. It doesn't. Davis claimed the move was legitimate, saying, "My husband and I have talked about this for quite some time and came to the conclusion that the Democratic Party had left us a long time ago, so why were we hanging on?" Stealing from Ronald Reagan, of course. Davis made those comments to Reuters in Washington, where she was attending the Values Voter Summit hosted by the Family Research Council. Much was made about the fact that Davis was a registered Democrat at the height of the national discussion about religious freedom that Davis stirred up. That, some political observers said, was an effort by conservative Republicans to point out the hypocrisy within the Democratic Party. In fact, I think it might have been a lot more devious. I think may well have been a very well-played ploy by the Democrats to hang Davis around the necks of the Republicans as part of the lead-up to the election. I, for one, am not buying it. It just doesn't smell right. Like I said, I think Kim Davis should go away. I think she does very little for the political discourse of this country. And if she doesn't want to do her job, well, then find somebody that will. Find somebody that will. And I've caught heat for this before. My position has not changed. You have not convinced me to change my opinion. It's 14 after on this Monday. This hour of the Steve Gruber Show brought to you by Mesa. Good health, good business, and great schools. Good health, good business, and great schools. We're going to talk about that Flint water and a lot more right after the break right here on this Monday. It's the Steve Gruber Show.
The Steve Gruber Show. American values with Midwestern common sense.
Monday.
That's right.
So good.
Just knew this would get some response. The hotline, by the way, 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. Yeah. Yeah, I think Kim Davis should be in jail if she refuses to do her job. And that's the position I take, and I don't shy from it. The hotline number is 888-900-9966. Frank on the line in DeWitt. Frank, welcome to the program.
Yes, good morning. I think Barack Obama should be in jail, and I think the Supreme Court justices should be in jail. This was an act of pure judicial tyranny. This was no different than the Dred Scott decision, and thank God people, when the Supreme Court in its infinite wisdom ruled that black people weren't fully human, that there were people that stood up and defied that kind of an illegal law. The law of this land is the Constitution. And we have a bunch of people that are continuously breaking the law, putting in what they call laws, and expecting us to obey it when they broke the law to put in these phony laws in the first place.
Yeah, but you're a whole different part of the ball game, Frank. I mean, okay, so who went to jail in the Dred Scott case?
I'm sure quite a few people did. And this, in effect,
I can assure you that not a single Supreme Court justice went to jail.
Was just not have her name on it. This effectively bars Christians from holding these kind of positions, which, of course, is what...
All right, so I'm going to ask you the question. We're going to go over this again, Frank. I'm going to ask you the question. You ready?
Her name...
Are you ready for the question, Frank? Stop. Are you ready for the question?
Are you what?
Here's the question. You ready to listen for a second? Here's a question. You ready?
Certainly.
If a Christian Quaker is the clerk of the county, pick your county, pick your state, I don't care. And they're a pacifist because they're a Quaker, but they're a Christian pacifist. They believe the Bible says they have to be pacifists. That's what the book says. And therefore, they refuse to issue concealed pistol licenses on their Christian faith. Are you okay with that?
What if the Quaker says...
No, answer my question.
Listen,
Are you okay with that?
This woman did not refuse to put out the license. She would do the licenses or do it while she held the position as long as her name wasn't associated on it.
She was elected to do a job.
A Quaker did too. Also, in this case, the woman was already in her position when this law got changed. And I would like to ask,
and what difference does that make? Hold on. What distinction does that make?
The Defense of Marriage Act and the Democrat administration in that state.
She wasn't.
When the Attorney General said that he wasn't.
Enough. The fact of the matter is, Frank, she was elected to do a job, duly elected by her constituents, not elected by her Christian constituents to, be the leader of the church choir. She was elected by her constituents to do a job. The job includes now issuing licenses for same-sex couples. Now, if you don't like that job, then don't take the job. And if the job changes, which happens all the time, well, the job wasn't that when they started. My job wasn't this when I started. Jobs change all the time. All right? And if you're not prepared to do the job, then find somebody that is or move on. You do have that choice. You have the liberty in America to move on. We're just not going to agree on this one, and I knew that's the way that was going to go. The phone number, you tell me if I'm wrong, 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. The fact of the matter is I think Kim Davis is a fraud. I think Kim Davis may well be a fraud. I mean, seriously, all of a sudden after she stirred all this up and Republicans have been, equated with knuckle-dragging, cave-dwelling, Neanderthals. Suddenly, Kim Davis is sent over to the Republican side. Oh, yeah, I'm on your side. Yeah, okay. You don't smell a setup here, Frank? Come on. At any rate, I think that Kim Davis is a fraud. She's been married, 4 times? She's been married 4 times. I guess apparently, that part of the scripture doesn't apply to her. Pick and choose the scripture that's conveniently located for your use. She can, commit adultery time and time and time again. And that's okay because that fits in her, godly worldview. Hate the sin, not the sinner. Frank, how about that? Hate the sin, not the sinner. That's kind of the way that's supposed to work. The scientific community is in speculation meantime, in overdrive today. In speculation ahead of an announcement coming later today by NASA of a major scientific find related to the planet of Mars. The specific nature of the discovery won't be revealed until a scheduled 11:30 press conference this morning at NASA headquarters in Washington. However, the roster of participants includes 2 authors of a paper that claimed images taken from orbit show flowing water on the surface of the red planet, prompting rumors that the announcement relates to the possible discovery of water in its liquid form. That'd be big. Water does something really important. Water creates life. It might be mold and mildew, but life it is. The authors of the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta and the principal investigator for high-resolution imaging science experiments at the University of Arizona in Tucson published their paper on the subject in 2011. Scientists have long known there is frozen water at Mars' poles, but they have never discovered liquid water. Any such discovery would have huge consequences for future expeditions, including NASA's goal of sending a manned mission to Mars by the 2030s, 15 years from now. Not very long. If their announcement that they found easily accessible, freely flowing liquid water under the surface, which is one of the theories we've been hearing for years and years, that has massive implications, both for the potential of life and sustainability of human beings. It'd be a big deal. Kind of fun, huh? All right, it's 25 after on a Monday. I'll mix it up with you on Monday. I don't mind. It's the Steve Gruber Show. I'll be right back.
Covering Michigan and the world from his bunker below the bridge. Here is Steve Gruber.
All righty, welcome back to it. 33 after the hour on a Monday. Really appreciate your support. Consumers Mutual Insurance bringing you this part of the program. Consumers Mutual, the company I turn to insure my family through all of the confusion. You can find out more at consumersmutual.org. They're a co-op. 40,000 of your friends and neighbors now taking Consumers Mutual. It's been a joy to work with, by the way. All right, so John Boehner shocks the political world and says, I'm out of here. You can have this mess. And then I shed tears of joy just in respect to John Boehner, who will probably be sobbing, on his way out the door. The professor, Allan Saxe, here, political science at the University of Texas, Arlington. Professor, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Don't burst into tears. Do not burst into tears, all right?
Well, it was a surprise. Next should be Mitch McConnell.
Thank God. Yes, please.
And frankly, he is more important to leave than John Boehner, because the Senate, of course, as we know, with this Iran deal that Mitch McConnell and the head of the Foreign Relations Committee, Bob Corker, agreed to, I wouldn't mind if both of them left, but especially Mitch McConnell. He just doesn't have the oomph. At least once in a while, John Boehner would stand up to President Obama, at least verbally. In action, not so much, but verbally he did. Mitch McConnell is just so weak in his presentation.
What presentation?
You're right. That doesn't have much oomph at all.
Here's the thing. Harry Reid, as much as I dislike the policies of Harry Reid, and I thought he was dirty and mean-spirited most of the time.
But boy, was he tough.
He got things done. He's still getting things done. And here's Mitch McConnell. Since November of 2014, the big monumental historic wins, and what happens? Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely, you're right. And in fact, when he ran for re-election in Kentucky, a lot of people, backed him who are very, very strong conservatives. And he said the right things. And everybody thought, by gosh, he had to get reelected because, it would just look bad for somebody who could be the Senate Majority Leader to get defeated. So they poured in a lot of money. They defeated him. He got reelected, and then nothing.
Yeah. So anyhow, I don't know if Mitch McConnell will go anywhere. We'll see. As I said, the one thing I'll say about John Boehner, and I'm glad to see John Boehner go, because I think at least it gives us a fighting chance to get something moving in the House. It gives us a fighting chance to change the agenda and change the conversation, and deal with somebody who understands how getting in front of the camera without tears in your eyes can actually be a benefit to the nation, how you can get out there and talk about your agenda and why it's important and why conservative values matter and why, conservative government approach matters. We can talk about that. But what I give him credit for is this. He had the courage to step down, and that took real courage. How many people in positions of power, will, freely give that up? So John Boehner gets credit and a tip of my hat for doing that at a minimum.
That is exactly true. And in fact, I've told my students that various presidents have actually stepped down when they knew the country was so split. One of them was Richard Nixon. The other was Lyndon Johnson in 1968, who could have run for re-election but did not. Various speakers have stepped down in relatively recent years, including Jim Wright here in Fort Worth, Texas, Newt Gingrich, and Bob Livingston, who I think was speaker for about 30 days. So there have been some speakers who have stepped down. And I tell my class in just a half-joking way, but it'd be serious, that I wish that two presidents would have stepped down to save the nation the division. One of them would have been President Barack Obama in 2012, who would have said to the nation, I know the nation is very divided, I'm stepping down. Good luck with President Obama.
Yeah.
And this is another one that I don't know if I'm going to get much applause from you for this one. I think George W. Bush in 2004, the nation was also very divided, and if he would have stepped down, I think would have helped as well. Of course, neither one of them did, but the president was there with Richard Nixon and Lyndon Johnson.
Well, the truth of the matter is, and I don't know that I don't know if it made a lot of difference for either one of those presidents, considering, we're at a time of division in America. We're at a time of division in America where you can't have a conversation with anybody or they just slam the door on you. Now, I don't do that, but if I try to have a conversation with liberals, they'd literally hang up the phone because they don't even want to discuss a different point of view, a different idea. George W. Bush stepping down may or may not have made a difference. Barack Obama may or may not have made a difference. I'll tell you this, though. They are two of the weakest presidents back-to-back at a critical time in American history. I believe that Obama is weaker than Bush, but I don't believe that Bush was a strong leader, and he made some serious critical errors in leading this country, and not to mention the fact that he spent a ton of money. You can talk about the war is right or wrong. I think the war was the right thing, and so did the majority of both houses of Congress initially, because we had bad intel. You can try to hang that around George Bush's neck, but it's not fair. Bad intel on all sides back then.
President Obama, I was reading yesterday, he is very weak in foreign affairs. Russia, Iran, moving together, Hezbollah, just literally taking over a good chunk of the Middle East now. Russia moving into Syria, which a lot of people don't know about because the media just doesn't talk about foreign politics that much. But Russia is literally establishing a major base in Syria and also moving into Iraq as well with the help of Iran. But domestically, President Obama is very strong with his executive orders. I read yesterday his executive orders just quadruple, but maybe even 10 times more than any other American president in recent history.
What's funny about that, though? Well, you tell liberals that, that's not true. They try to cite these orders about executive orders, about the history of those. What they don't, care to admit is that Barack Obama has made more executive orders that have actual impact on policy and so forth, instead of, executive orders on, say, we're going to fix this road or, change this, sign on a road or something silly that means very little. A lot of those have gone on. The way he's using executive orders is unprecedented and I would venture to say unconstitutional. I stick with that.
And Congress has let him get away with it.
Well, absolutely. Well, right, because here you have Mitch McConnell, who basically allowed the Iran deal, allowed the Trade Pacific Partnership deal, allowed every deal. What do we run out of money here in 3 days or something else, and then we'll get run over again, and they'll raise the debt limit to $21 trillion or whatever they do, to foolishly, like a drunken sailor, skip all the way down the street with our money in their pocket, even though they have no way to pay the mortgage. It
really is a shame what has happened under the administration of President Obama, and also I'm just not quite as enthusiastic about President George W. Bush either as I used to be. He did do the executive orders, a few of them, but not nearly as much as President Obama. But he was, in many ways, a president that people just did not have trust in. But that's another deal. It's happened, it's gone. But President Obama is still here for another year and a half.
Yeah, and there you go. Because I can assure you, he's not going to resign. All right,
that's right.
Take a breath. We're going to talk more about who might be the next president of the United States. Donald Trump still holding his position. Ben Carson, who was on the program here just a couple of days ago for a long interview, he's still surging in the polls. Carly's still doing well. We'll talk about that with the professor. Straight ahead on this Monday on the Steve Gruber Show. Sit tight.
touch with Michigan and the world.
All right, it's Monday. Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show, where vegetarians are people too. Make no mistake. Let's see here. See, I do that just for you, Professor. That's how much we love you here, Professor. Yeah, I just, every now and then I just got to share. See, I got you to laugh. See, isn't that beautiful? It's beautiful. We're here with Dr. Allan Saxe, professor of political science at the University of Texas, Arlington, and an avowed vegetarian. God bless him for that. That leaves more for me. I'm all right with that. Hey, let's see here. Carly Fiorina, not backing down from her Planned Parenthood claims, even though they have been refuted from many directions, saying there is no such video. Although, if you saw her video from on the internet, a commercial that came back, it showed a fetus, and that footage came from somewhere, although I understand it's a little more dated, but it's not inaccurate. And she says, here's the deal. Planned Parenthood is collecting live fetuses, which we would prefer to call babies, and having them dissected for parts, and she's not backing down from it.
I heard her interview yesterday. I think it was with Chuck Todd, and he asked her that. And, boy, you're exactly right. She stuck to it. She didn't give up.
In fact, hold on right there. Hold on, Professor.
He interviewed Hillary Clinton before, then he interviewed Carly Fiorina. And he did ask some follow-up questions with Hillary Clinton, but maybe I'm reading too much into it. His style, his ferocity was not nearly as great with Hillary Clinton as he was with Carly Fiorina.
Of course not. No, you're not reading it, dude.
He was really tough with Carly Fiorina. He asked some questions of Hillary Clinton, but then he let it go, and she sort of giggled and made it sort of a nice deal. But with Carly Fiorina, boy, he really bored in.
Of course he did.
It was just more intense, I guess is the word for it. What the Republicans have got to do in the nomination process, the one thing they have to look to, which of these candidates, potential candidates, can bring out the voters. They've got to be able to bring out the voters. And I don't know whether it's Carly Fiorina or Dr. Carson, but I think it could be Marco Rubio is the one that could bring out the voters, and that is the key thing. You keep reading and hearing about various candidates saying this group stayed home in this year, and that group stayed home in another year. And they're right. There were a lot of Republicans who did not vote in the past two presidential elections. They've got to have somebody that can bring out the voters.
Maybe I've got it backwards. See, for some time now, for the past many weeks, I have said a great ticket for the Republicans to have a shot at winning would be John Kasich on the top and Marco Rubio on the bottom. Maybe I've got that flip-flopped.
Yeah, Marco Rubio will not be a vice presidential candidate.
I wouldn't
don't
bet
believe
that.
Marco Rubio and John Kasich would not be a bad team, or Marco Rubio and Dr. Ben Carson. But Marco Rubio, I think, is the individual that can bring out the voters. He's starting to come up in the polls, not dramatically, just sort of seeping up ever incrementally all the time. And Donald Trump calls him a lightweight. And by the way, Donald Trump is still at the top. And but he can't bring out the mass of voters. His unpopularity rating and disapproval is just way too high. He's rejuvenated things. He's brought out some big issues. But I don't believe Donald Trump is the one in the end that can bring out the mass numbers of Republican voters that is so important. The Democrats are going to have their voters. They're going to have them. But the Republicans have got to have somebody who can match him.
Well, right. We ought to thank Donald Trump regardless of whether or not.
Absolutely.
Because let's be honest, 25 million people watching debates that learned about Iran, that learned about the Planned Parenthood, butchery of babies and the other things that are going on, never would have heard any of those things if not for Donald Trump, who clearly drove the ratings.
Oh, that is true. No question about that. He's brought the ratings up, but I don't know if he can bring out the voters. I think Marco Rubio may be able to. Maybe Carly Fiorina. We'll have to see. Again, we're a year and a half off the actual election, but the conventions are going to be held less than a year from now. So it's very important, I think, during the next year, the Republicans look at some of these candidates. Who is the individual that can really do it? Rejuvenate the American electorate and bring them out. If the Republicans cannot do it this coming presidential year, it's gone for a generation, maybe more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, maybe.
Unfortunately,
maybe
but
permanently.
that's the deal.
Yeah, maybe permanently is the problem there.
It could be. because America really is changing. Nobody ever would have thought about it, that when President Obama said, we're going to transform this country, what he meant. And he's meaning this by immigration, and boy, is it coming in. There's no question about that.
No,
in every direction.
Yeah, he's changed this. And meanwhile, the Pope says we need to be more generous.
That's
really?
Right.
We need to be more generous on immigration. Are you out of your,
We are already generous.
pontifical mind? Yeah. Anyhow. Meanwhile, on another front, I'll just get your take on this because Bill Clinton surfaced at least briefly again to say that Hillary's email controversy is being propped up by the media and the Republicans, that there's really nothing to it. It's like the whole standard Clinton playbook rears its head.
And he blames the Republicans.
Of course, and the media.
And by the way, I would ask Mr. President, isn't that what American democracy and elections are all about? Is that one political party opposes the other political party, and the media is supposed to look at people in a strong way, and they're doing their job. And in fact, the Republicans ought to do it even stronger yet. It's the nature of democracy. I love politicians that say they don't like politics. That's exactly what President Clinton is saying.
Yeah, I don't like politics unless it's working for me.
That's right.
As long as it's working for him, he's okay with
Exactly.
it. If it starts working against me, it's a problem. Professor, always a pleasure, my
Thank
friend.
you.
I greatly appreciate it. Go teach those young minds.
I'm ready for them.
Yeah, good luck with that.
It
All
is
right.
tough. It is tough.
No, I'm sure. I don't think I'd have the patience for it. I'll tell you that.
It
Anyhow.
is. You just don't know the half of it.
There you have it. Professor Allan Saxe,
you.
everybody, political science, University of Texas in Arlington, and a big Dallas Cowboys fan. I'll forgive him for that. But right now, at least he's got a team. At least he has a team to root for in the National Football League. There is the Detroit Lions certainly didn't do it for us, letting us down. So wow, we'll talk about that in just a moment here. Also ahead today, we'll have Steve Bucci, the director for the Heritage Foundation when it comes to the Sarah Allison Center. Is Russia preparing to move 2 armed divisions into Syrian bases? Apparently. And what's Barack Obama going to do about it? He's going to talk about global warming, I'm quite sure. It's the Steve Gruber Show on a Monday.